I'm going to be your facilitator. Now, you've heard the term boot camp and buzz cuts and those kinds of things. I'm not sure, as I think back when the name boot camp was given to this exercise some 20 years ago, it's been around for a while, that is not necessarily an appropriate name nowadays, because it does conjure up in your mind a very tough experience and maybe a very demeaning experience beneath your dignity in some ways. It's not that way at all. It's not training. We're not here to necessarily learn something new through the traditional teaching method, where you're listening to somebody like me, the expert, coming in to talk about things. What we're going to do here today is experience certain situations, because as you all know, the greatest learning takes place when you're under pressure and under fire, with a customer there demanding service, and why do you do this to me? And I can't accept that. And that's when your mind starts to go, and that's when you start to dig deep inside yourself and bring out those experiences that you've had over the past, and you do something to satisfy that customer. And usually what it means is working around the process that you've been given. And so that's what this is all about, is process. And we're going to learn about process by actually doing it. Now, I don't know how many of you have been in the other room, but there you probably have seen a lot of tools and fixtures and things to work with your hands. And you probably are all hobbyists in one way or another. You have a hobby that you do, and I'll bet it has something to do with working with your hands. And also in this exercise, we want you to work with your brain. And hopefully by tomorrow night, work with your heart as well and get it all working together. And that's when things really start to happen. It becomes a really wonderful place to be. Now I might ask, why process? Why is process now the hot item here at NationsBank? Now, Mike, you did say you've been working for 15 months with me. Is it really 15 months? It feels like 15 years.
About that.
Yeah. NationsBank has a way of kind of grabbing up everything and running with it. And so we feel like NationsBank has come along and grabbed us and completely absorbed and devoured all of our capabilities, and time really goes by quickly. But why is NationsBank so excited about process, and why now, in 1998? In fact, process has been around a long time. As a matter of fact, it's been around probably since time began. And all of you here used a process to get here this morning, but you just didn't think of it as a process. And often when you're under fire and under pressure, you'll create a process intuitively, and it'll work for you, and then you'll forget about it. And somebody else will be faced with the same situation, and they'll create a process, and it'll be slightly different than yours. And what, as a result, as an organization, you'll never have a chance to improve it, because you never wrote it down and said, this is what I did last time. What can I change in the process to do something better this time? And that's the beauty of process. How many here are golfers? Is that a process? Have you ever thought of it as a process when you're out there? Probably not. As a matter of fact, I like golf as an example because there's no opportunity to do rework. Everything that happens prior to the club hitting the ball is the process. And once that club hits the ball goes, doesn't it? And you can see it sort of veering off, and you say, ooh, I didn't want that. And if you had a long arm with an elastic elbow that could reach out very quickly and pull that ball back and put it on the tee and do it again, you'd do it, wouldn't you? Just like that. Well, from my perspective, which is through the eyes of a process person, I see organizations doing that every day. They execute the process, and the ball goes off in a different direction. And rather than say, what's wrong with the process that caused that, they devote all of their energy towards reaching out, grabbing that ball, and bringing it back again. We call that rework. And so that all of your, in golf, as you know, all of your work towards improving process is done before that club hits the ball. Isn't that true? Your swing, the balance, the coordination, all of that is process. But you never think of it as process. The reason you don't is golf is a game played by an individual. It's just you and the ball and the course, of course. Now, what happens here in Nations Bank or in your organization? Your work depends on someone else's work, and the work that you do is handed off to someone else. And the process means many people have to kind of work together. And that's when process really becomes important, and it becomes important to think about process. And there are perfect examples of where process is very much a way of life, one that you'll all know of. That's in an operating room. You've all seen the inside of an operating room, or if you ever watched some of these programs on television. An operating room is very much a process. They call it procedures, but it's a process. And why is it so process-oriented? Because it's a life and death situation. And also, they're constantly improving the process. It's very well documented. Everybody knows their place. It's all coordinated. And what you can do when you document a process, which is a difficult, beneath your dignity to do, difficult thing to do, it's the love-hate relationship that Michael was talking about. But that's a perfect place and a perfect example of process. Running a nuclear power station is another example of process. Procedures are followed. They're constantly improved. Why? The consequences are unthinkable. Aircraft, air transportation industry is a perfect example of a process-oriented business.
What about
NASA
NASA?
is a research organization.
Well, Space Center.
The space is exactly. Launching the shuttle, launching vehicles into space is extremely process-oriented. But behind all of that, and NASA is one of our customers, is a very, very research-oriented, experimental type of organization. And they are, I might add, using this process and getting great benefit from it because they can actually look at research as a process and looking at experimentation as a process and being better at it and getting being more productive with experimentation. But certainly launching the shuttle is extremely process-oriented. And the idea is every space shot, there's improvement. There are learnings, and then there are improvements which are built into the process until finally the process becomes the core value of the organization. So that's why process is important. This isn't anything new. You're not here to learn anything new. I'm going to take what you already know, and I'm going to take it and bring it out on the surface so that you can use that in a new and more productive way. And that's the reason this is all experiential. Now I've got some overhead slides for you. I don't want to disappoint you. Whenever you sit down and come to a seminar, right, we've got to listen to the expert up here talking about and using slides. So we've got some for you. And then we're quickly going to depart into the next room, and we're going to run a company that has evolved over many, many years, and it has a certain culture. And I'll guarantee you it's not a process-oriented culture. Okay? It's probably one that you are all familiar with because you've all worked in one of these organizations. And we'll see how effective it is. And it's quite effective. It does work. But I do refer to aviation because I like it. The safety record of aviation is hard to beat. It's safer to take an airplane than it is to drive a car. Stats show that. The most dangerous part of any journey is the trip to the airport and the trip away from the airport. The safest part is when you're in the airplane. A very process-oriented organization. And I like aviation. It's one of my hobbies. And so what you're going to go through here in the next couple of days is a business simulator that's set up to do what? Well, it's set up to fail. It's going to put you in an environment where you better figure out what to do, and you better figure out fast, because failure is not an option, and you've got to correct this situation. That's what it's set up to do. And you'll notice in aviation, this is a simulator, but the gentlemen working the simulators are trained pilots. They are pilots who've been flying for many years. And why do we put them in a simulator every 6 months and, quote, recertify them? And why is it that simulators are only used in aviation? Why aren't they used in business? And why aren't they used in, well, they are used in nuclear power stations and in operating rooms, and starting to, wherever there's a life and death situation, people are using simulators now. It's kind of interesting, for me anyway, because I've been using this simulator for many years. Now we've got businesses that are in life and death situations. What an opportunity for a simulator. And hey, we've got one in the next room, we're going to use it the same way. But pilots tend to build up a habit that's not conscious. It's an intuitive way of responding to problems. And if that intuitive response is incorrect, pilots tend to fly airplanes into the ground. Probably 99% of aviation accidents for commercial airplanes and general aviation airplanes are caused by, what do you think? Pilot error, the human. Exactly. Many good airplanes have been flown into the ground. All engines running perfectly, all passengers sipping coffee and thinking about what they're going to do tomorrow, and all of a sudden, it's all over. There's another simulator that's coming out, and it's called High Performance Driving. And I took a high performance driving course. And one of the things they taught me is that if you're trying to basically avoid that obstacle, and that obstacle could be a child who just ran out in front of you, they say, don't look at the obstacle that you're trying to avoid. Look somewhere else, because under pressure, your whole body tends to drive the car to where you're looking. How many of you here in the room, when something happens quickly in front of you in a car, put the brake on very quickly? Who does that? You all do. It's so fast, before you know it, your foot's on the brake, to the point that automotive engineers have had to create automatic braking systems to prevent you from locking the brakes up. And so that intuitive reaction that you do, and remember that. If you ever try to miss something in your car and you start going into that panic mode, if you're looking at the object, you'll have a tendency to drive into it. And I didn't realize that until I got into this car on a high-performance speedway, and I did it. And I noticed that under that pressure, my whole body just tended to drive towards what I was looking at. Really shocking. And when your customer is in front of you, demanding, and you don't want to lose that customer, what are you going to do? It's an intuitive response. And that's what aviation simulators are for. They put pilots into that situation, they put them under pressure, they load up with various things that go wrong, one problem after another, until finally the mind starts to shed things, and it finally starts to do things that you're not even aware of. And so the business simulator we have here is set up the same way. We're going to put you under pressure, and you're going to do exactly what we know you're going to do. And the more complex things get, the more hectic it is, the more you're going to focus right on the individual tasks that you do. And we know that's exactly what you're going to do, and we know the airplane's going to crash. And you're going to say, what happened? I was doing a great job, and all of a sudden it crashed. So that's what this is all about. You are the experts. You are the captains right now of your aircraft. My job here is to help you as the facilitator through this journey over the next couple of days. I'm not the expert. I've learned everything I know about process by putting on this boot camp, because every time I put on a boot camp, the room is filled with experts, and they all challenge me, and they challenge the metaphors and the exercises that we have. And over years and years and years of challenging, we have evolved into this exercise that you're going to experience today. And it is a process, believe me, very much so. And all I have to do is let it happen. I just have to sit back and watch. And the process does all the work. And oh, by the way, if you're fighting the word process right now, and I don't want to do this, because I like sort of shooting from the hip, I like being a cowboy. You know, processes do all that work for you if you let them. And then you can be released from that need to have to go and work around things every day and use your brains and your capability and your experience to really do what you do well, which is serve customers and make that experience really wonderful for them. Does anybody know of a certain food product that's kind of basic to our culture? It's a little round bun, 2 buns with a meat in the middle, called a hamburger. There's an organization that's got a good reputation for making many of them. And what's interesting is they bring high school students in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 4, they're right in there kind of doing everything with only 2 hours of experience. The processes there do all the work. The people spend their time being excited, having enthusiasm, serving customers, and making the whole environment a fun and wonderful place to be. And people just line up every day. And no matter where you go to this restaurant, and you know which one I'm talking about, no matter where you go in the world, you get the same product. Now that sounds a little boring, but consistency means dependability, means I always go back to the same place, because we are somewhat creatures of habit. And here in your business, what you need to do is have customers believe and see that you are consistent and reliable, and they'll always come back. And isn't that what you want? Customers coming back? That's what processes can do for you. So we're going to put you in this failure mode, and you're going to crash. No matter how hard you try, the process is going to crash for you. And so you're going to experience that. So don't feel bad when you crash. And we're going to analyze what went wrong just before the crash. And then we'll change the process, not the output of the process. We won't try to chase after that ball on the golf course before it hits the ground and run back and put it on the tee. We'd look kind of silly, wouldn't we? We're going to try to do all of our work before the club hits the ball. And we're going to, guess what? Do it again, and do it again, and do it again. Because repetition is a wonderful thing. You sort of get into that, I do it automatically without thinking, until we succeed. Now I'm going to start my process. I want to know more about you. And what I'd like to do is have you all introduce yourself to me, and I'll introduce myself to you. I'd like to start with you, Ginger, and what I would like you to do is describe, first of all, what you do here at NationsBank, here in your organization. And I'm sure that as you think back to your experiences, that you can always think about something that's really exciting that you did well. And it's probably when you were in an emergency situation and blood pressure was up and tension was up and everybody was watching you. Describe what you like most about your job. And then, of course, let's get out of the job for the moment and talk about your hobbies. What do you do when you're not at work? You're on vacation. Everyone has a hobby. What's interesting is you bring very, very special skills to those hobbies, and I really enjoy this part of boot camp because I go around and hear all the hobbies, and I've heard some hobbies that you just wouldn't imagine. It's incredible, the talent that exists in organizations today. You can tell by the hobbies. Then I want you to tell me, and think about this for a while, what special skills that you bring to your hobby also you bring to your job. It'd be kind of an interesting exercise. I'd like to take the next 30 minutes to do that. And I'm giving you a chance to prepare here, Ginger. Yeah, I know you are. You're just going like that. And then you're going to set the stage for everybody else. All right, so I'm depending on you to do this one just right. And this is when the best comes out of people, when they're under pressure, right?
My name's Ginger Craig, and I work in management development here at NationsBank in Charlotte. And that's a part of personnel, and what we do is we do organizational development consulting for the various lines of business. And what that might include is working with the lines of business to strengthen some of their personnel systems. So, for example, their selection systems or their performance management or their leadership development systems and what they have in place there to help them strengthen those to drive towards their business goals. What I enjoy most about my job is that we usually have the opportunity to work from a strategic perspective, so some of the things that we put into place have a long-lasting impact, and that's fulfilling to me personally. And my hobbies, I like to do triathlons, and so I spend some time, my spare time, training for those, and I'd say that's the one that comes to mind first. And the special skills in my hobbies that contribute to my job performance, I would say motivation to get up early in the morning and go for the run or the swim or the jog or whatever. And also initiative, and then I guess I'd say determination. Those three help me. What?
Endurance.
Endurance, there you go.
So,
Long lasting.
yeah.
And you talk about change. I think really the information age has passed us. Don't jump on me for this. There's a new age. Frankly, myself, I've always been in it. So have you, Reggie, in your comments, and so have you, Tracy. It's the age of learning, adaptive learning. Those organizations who know how to learn by taking in all of the capabilities that are around you are going to be the organizations and the companies of the 21st century. I heard a comment just the other day about Microsoft. We look at the IQ. If you have a high Q, a high IQ, they hire. Don't have a job for you, you're hired. Intellectual capital. Got enough financial capital, I guess. Intellectual capital now is the new asset of the 21st century. Adaptive learning is how you develop it and build its capability. So Tracy, you've only been here for 3 weeks? Mm-hmm. Don't change. Keep learning, okay. Keep adapting, and spread it around. Neil?
Good morning, I'm Neil Cashton. I'm with Florida.
This white hair, I'm really only 32 years old. But actually, I do remember back before computers. And what you just talk about, there was a time. But the situation you refer to is going on long before computers. You just happen to notice it now. This seems like a dumb thing that we do to our customers. Well, it's because it's so obvious. But before computers, it wasn't obvious. And oh, by the way, there's all kinds of places in your organization right now that computers don't touch that are not obvious. And that's what Process will do, is get rid of all of that so that when you do use technology, it really enables what you've already got to work even better. And I love that example that you have about being Annie Mae and stage production. I wonder if that's a process. Really is, isn't it?
Flawless.
It has to be flawless. But do you think to the performers it is? Probably lots of little things that are going wrong, but the customers don't see that.
Assistant director and
Right.
stagehand.
Stagehand, and it's music, it's in harmony, and it's working, and they can repeat it, and it gets better, and it gets better. Another example of a process. And the creative people are now they're not slaves to a broken process. They're there now to really bring out their creativity and really get those customers happy. In so many places I've seen people are slaves to the system, or as the person you talk to on the phone. You're mad and you're showing that anger over the phone. Why do I have to give you my number? Person on the other one, because the system doesn't let me see your number. And I can't do anything about it. A slave to the system. And that's the challenge we have with Process. An orchestra, and boy, and I listen to the hobbies and I listen to the introductions, I realize the talent that's in this room and in most organizations. And you look at a symphony orchestra, for example, you can imagine all the talent of all the individual professionals that are there. And yet somehow it all has to be coordinated so that music comes out. And you always know what it sounds like just before music starts to play. Everybody's practicing and it's just noise. And I look at organizations and I hear a lot of noise, not very much music. And I see all these individual people who are professionals and are true experts in what they do. But the making of the music is yet to be done, yet to be realized. Here in 1998, when I thought this would have been over many years ago, I started doing this in 1967, and I thought I'd be finished in 1972, on to something else, because this is really easy. I think I'll probably never realize the true potential of this. I'll be long gone before I see the whole world become more process-oriented. Just remember that there's a word that is sometimes around your organization called the P word. And what processes are, is they're liberating. They're not confining. They will take you away from the burden of having to always be running around making up for bad processes. You can get the processes to do all that dumb work, which leads me to my hobby. Well, first of all, my job. I'm doing my job right now. And I just love doing this. And actually, the whole part of boot camp that I love the most is sitting here listening to you introduce yourselves. It's just phenomenal. I just sit back here and listen to all the hobbies and the skills that are brought doing those and the jobs that you do and what gets you excited about it. That's really fascinating for me. I really enjoy that. That's what I enjoy most about it. The other part that I enjoy most of all is I walked over here this morning and I picked up this facilitator guide, which is the guide that, a fairly thick book. And we put this together, and it's sort of like an aircraft checklist. And it helps us transfer the intellectual capital of this experience to your organization through getting people to do what I'm doing here today. And I looked at it, if you look at all the little sticky notes, and if you look at all the notes that are inside, look at, okay? And I was just awestruck to see all of this. It's Tracy Pennington's facilitator guide. And I said, and something, I said, now I understand why I do this and why I like doing it and why I can never get enough of it. And I just look through this and I just think, this is absolutely fabulous. I mean, this makes my job, to me, when I see this, the most important thing I think I could ever possibly do is realizing the true potential of what people can do. And that's what I really enjoy most about my job. I walked in here this morning and it hit me right in the face when I was looking through this. Just unbelievable. My hobbies, I have a few. One of them is aviation. I fly a transport category airplane. That's how I got here yesterday. It's a two-pilot airplane. You have to have two pilots, but there's only one, and that's me. And I have to have a special certification to fly it single pilot. And Jeff, who came down with me, will probably attest. I just sit there, and half the time, you're probably wondering whether I'm awake or not.
What kind of plane is it?
Pardon me? It's a Beechcraft King Air. It's a turbine aircraft, pressurized, 8-passenger, bar, toilet, place to sleep, all those good things. I spend most of my time up in the front office, and lots of buttons and gauges and all that sort of thing. But I fly it with my finger. I do my exercises before I get up in the morning, and then I fly to Charlotte in 2 hours. It's easy. Don't even think about it. It's intuitive. There's a checklist, and it's a process. And the process does all the work. I enjoy the flight. Not one of those pilots with the goggles and the white scarf flying in the breeze, and when something goes wrong, the pilot's going to save the day, right? Wrong. Not in today's environment. It's the process that must never fail, must never let the customers down. So I bring that skill, but I'm also a mountain biker, and I have 4 children, the oldest of which is 26. My daughter, guess what? She's an engineer, an engineering physicist. Yeah, designs airplanes, too, for a living. And I have three sons. Some have been here in this facility helping out. 15-year-old is the youngest, an 18 and a 23-year-old. And for those of you who have young children, and you think that you're looking for a book on parenting, forget it. There isn't such a thing, even if you can find it on the bookshelf. I think what this is all about, the process of parenting, for your information, to me, is children will push you up against the wall until your true beliefs and your true values are visible. And that's when they learn. Everything you say to them doesn't mean anything. It's when it's under pressure and what you really stand for starts to come out, and you say, I'm not going to vary from this. They push for that line, because the line is what you stand for. It's your mission. That's how children learn. You can't stop that, and there's no training for it. You've already got it. You are already very skilled at it. So the skills that I bring to my job are this whole process thinking. And I just let the process do all the work, and I have a lot of time to relax and do what I enjoy. And I've worked in organizations and watched them be like that. One of them is Hewlett-Packard. You ever heard of Hewlett-Packard? Way back in the early 70s, or late 70s, we started with them doing this kind of thing. And people would go through Hewlett-Packard and they get the sense that people are just sitting around drinking coffee, chatting, having fun. And the company was making money like you wouldn't believe. It went from a $5 billion a year company back in the middle 80s to a $37 billion company today. And this whole company brought in what we call this process management culture. Not as something special. They never said the word quality. Matter of fact, the chairman at the time, John Young, got rid of all the quality departments. Didn't want the word quality even spoken in the company. Because what you get out of a good process is quality. It's a given. So if you are a quality organization, your job is quality, to me, that's too late. You want to spend your energy on the process so that the process gives you the quality. And that whole company basically took this culture in. Now I see a lot of, in the last 30 years, I've seen a lot of companies come together and there's a clashing of cultures. There's a culture of the company that's in the buying mode and the company that was bought. And these two cultures come together and they're fighting. Who's going to win? My suggestion to you and your organization is don't try to win and don't want to be lost. You don't want to lose either. Create a new culture that you both can really aspire to. And the new culture ought to have some characteristics of process in it, a process management culture. Well, that brings us to the end of all of this introduction, which took a little longer than I expected, but to me it's the most important part. I'm going to give you a break for some coffee right now, because I need one too. But what we are doing here today, I'll just show you this, and we'll have a coffee break and then come back, and I'll do the introduction to the push company we're going to run here in a minute. This is on page 2 of your workbook. This is a process diagram. And for anyone here, have you ever built a house or part of building a house? Anybody ever done that? You have any drawings for that, architectural drawings? Can you imagine building a house without architectural drawings? This is an architectural drawing of a process. It's a documentation of what we're going to do. And there, at a very high level, there are 3 steps. And every organization has a very high-level process, which only has maybe 3 or 4 steps in it, including your organization. It's a setup, ignite, launch, sort of like launching the shuttle. That's where I got the terms, actually, from working with NASA. And the most important part of this process, you tell me, guess what? What is the most important part if you had to choose? Setup. Yeah. If you don't get that right, the rest of it's rework. And that means selecting the right process to work on, having a champion, all of these steps. Then the next part is ignite. Get people excited. Give them confidence in being able to carry out what they're about to embark on. And that's what we're doing here for the next couple of days. This is not a training program. You will walk out of here tomorrow without really learning anything new. What I'm doing is bringing back things you already know into the surface so that you can say, hey, now I see it. It's hidden right now. And then there's this process, a recipe, if you like, we call CPI, and it's kind of the engine that makes this work. Tom, Mr. Fix-It, this is where you are. You're right in here. You do this intuitively. You have no boxes for it. But it sure works, doesn't it? Because you can fix anything. And that's the engine that makes all of this work. And if you think that way, you shouldn't have to even bother having a drawing for it. And that's what I'm looking for here in your company, is to do away with all of the drawings and be actually operating this way as a way of life. Certainly in your introduction this morning, I heard a lot of words like internal customer, external customer, reorganization, my job is, and while I was flying down here yesterday with nothing to do at 27,000 feet, except let the process happen, Jeff, who was with me, was talking about his wife's company being bought out by another, and they went through an organization. And his wife was having, I'm talking about your wife, Jeff, Penny was having a bit of a problem with this new organization in that there was only 2 jobs in the company. Those who serve customers and those who support those who serve customers. That was it. That was the reorganization. Rather interesting. You might want to sort of think about that for a while. Okay, a little bit more lecture, and then we're going to play in my sandbox next door. All right? And I emphasize the word my sandbox because I know what the sand can do, and you're going to experience it, and that's where all the learning takes place, and it's a lot of fun. But again, I have to give you some more of this information, and I'm spending a bit more time than we usually do here to get it all on tape so that Nations Bank folks can use this tape in the future to help themselves out. We talk about processes, and Neil, you know, he sets me up just before coffee. What did you say, Neil, about golf?
I know of 13 different processes.
Yeah. He knows of 13 different processes. And what was my answer to that?
There's only one.
There's only one. The fact is, golf is an example of a work process that's very dependent on the worker. The process cannot work by itself. You can't automate it, or you can. It's very difficult and requires a lot of automation. But it is very dependent, the outcome is very dependent on the person doing the work. And the process is not robust, and those words will become a little clearer for you as we move on. That's a daily example of a work process. And there's only one. The business process is when other people are involved. And it generally starts with a customer, and it ends with a customer. If you think about it, that's your whole business. That's everything you do here. And it's all a process. And there are supporting parts of it, and then there are core parts of it that deliver the value directly to your customer. You better get that one right before you deal with any of the others. And then there's this other process that management does not like to hear about, and that's management process, because management does not consider what they do as a process. If you ever look the word management up in the dictionary, it has to do with hands, it has to do with control, it has to do with keeping things as they are. Sort of like the glue. And if there's anything you don't want in your organization right now, it's glue. Because the business environment is change. It always was, by the way. And you do have a lot more choices than you think. Because that's what really is kind of nice, is to have choices. It reminds me of a story I'd like to share with you about Sir Winston Churchill. Anybody here not know who Winston Churchill was? The great war guru of the Second World War, Britain. Many stories have been written about him and books and so on, but this particular story I like, and it has to do with choices and change. And he was in Australia during the Second World War, and it's a long time ago, even before my time. And he was at a cocktail party with the Archbishop of Adelaide. And a cocktail waitress came up and offered them a tray of drinks. And I don't know if you know the reputation of Sir Winston, but he was an alcoholic. Guaranteed, certified, total. And of course, when the drinks were offered to Sir Winston, he obliged very quickly. And the waitress turned to the Archbishop and offered him the drinks. And he haughtily said, "Young lady, I would rather commit adultery than drink alcohol." And she turned and walked away. And as she walked away, Sir Winston said, "Excuse me, young lady, please come back here. I didn't realize we had a choice." And you may not realize you have a choice. You can choose to really get excited about fixing up and making up for bad processes in your organization, because a lot of people survive and get promoted by knowing how to do that well. And they want to keep it just as it is, thank you very much, because it's control, it's power, it's advancement, it's upward mobility. And the choice is, or you can fix the process and not have to do that anymore and just let it happen. See what is available to you after you fix the process. You'll find there's lots of opportunities, more than you'll ever imagine. And that's the challenge I give to managers and leaders. The biggest problem in North America today with instituting a process management culture, and you don't even have to use the word process, just improving the performance of your organization and realizing its true potential and building your customer base, the biggest inhibitor to that is not outside of your organization, but inside. And the reason it's not realized is because the leadership in most organizations is not there. Most leaders today got there by knowing how to survive in broken processes. And do you think they want to change when they finally get to the top? No. They want to keep it as it is. Management. So we have a lack of leadership. What I've seen here in your organization is really good leadership. I am impressed. I'd be surprised if this stock doesn't double in the next couple of years. You are really on your way. What an opportunity you have with the leadership you have in place. I can count on my hand the number of leaders that I've seen in 30 years that are like your leaders. Great. Good leaders need good followers. So the enemy is not outside. The enemy is inside. And just like in the military situation, you're going to win a war, better recognize who the enemy is or what the enemy is. Then understand that enemy even more than the enemy understands himself. And then you figure out how to overcome the enemy. What do you think the enemy is inside of organizations? Question for you.
Tradition.
Tradition,
Inertia.
inertia, apathy, politics, status quo. Ah, you're on. Page 3 in your workbook. I think it's the command and control hierarchy. Because what happened after the Second World War is the military model got instituted in industry. And after all, some of the big corporations were those who were serving the military establishment anyway, so why not adopt the structure? And in this organization, people work for bosses and satisfy bosses. Where's the customer? It's outside of the box. It's outside of the organization. People here do not care or even know the customer. And where's the process that serves the customer? Can't see it. It must be there because customers are getting value in some way, somehow. But it's a real chore to cut across this organization and get the value delivered to the customer. But it's in there, and it's broken up into pieces, and it's hidden. And this organization will never be able to improve that process because it doesn't even know it exists. It's so segmented into its parts. That's the enemy. Lots of good people in there. An organization that's set up to fail. Now, back in the 60s, it could succeed because there was lots of money around. But nowadays, well, you got a global competition. And here's a cartoon that kind of shows what I'm saying. Good people have their skills waiting to be told to do their job. So the boss does what bosses do, tell people what to do. Everybody gets ready. You can see that they're all listening and ready to go to work. Going to do what the boss says, right? I wonder about that. So everybody works very hard. There's our day-to-day activities. Endurance, skill, excitement, right? Fun, teamwork. We're a quality organization. And at the end of the day, where do we get? How much progress do we make? Got a lot of work done. Didn't move very far off the line. This is an organization out of balance. When it's out of balance, it's fighting itself internally. It's using up a lot of its energy and resources to deal with the imbalance. It's like a propeller on an airplane. A pilot's greatest fear is to have just a slightest small piece of metal, the size of a 10-cent piece, break off from the propeller. Because if that happens, if you don't shut that engine down and stop that propeller from rotating in a hurry, guess what it'll do? The imbalance will be so bad it'll tear the engine off the wing and rip open the fuel cage, the fuel lines, and start a fire, and you'll crash and burn from that little piece of metal that falls off because it's imbalanced. And all the energy is going in to fight the imbalance, and organizations are imbalanced. And all the energy is going in to fight that, to get it synchronized and in harmony is the challenge. synchronized, harmony, everybody pulling for the customer. This is a horizontal, process-centered organization. What's the boss doing here? Yeah. Looking into the future, this is where we want to go, keeping on track. Not telling people what to do. They're all together, synchronized. All of the energy is being used to move the boat, the scull, forward. And if you did an organizational chart of that company, this is what it would look like. Starts with the customer, ends with the customer. There's the core steps in the process that deliver value to the customer. Everything else is a resource. It needs to be directed and led, and that's what management do, or does. And there are process owners to the large pieces of that customer value creating process. And to be successful, it needs 4 parts. It needs focus on customers. It needs the alignment of the whole organization around customers. It needs brain power, human capital. And technology. Notice how I left technology down here in the right-hand side. It's the last thing you do is use technology. You do all the work in getting processes right and understanding them, then you apply technology. Manufacturing industry did that way back when I first started. They automated everything because they wanted to get the people out of the process because that would save money. And they made a terrible mistake. You may have heard of that. They automated at the wrong time. They automated very complex processes. They figured that the robot was the solution to all their problems because people come to work to do a bad job, right? They come in specifically to make things wrong. That's why they live. So get the people out of the equation and put a robot in there. That was the mentality of our manufacturing world back in the 70s and 80s. And what they learned, and what we all learned, was no, let's get the processes right, let's simplify it, then we'll automate the things that we shouldn't expect people to do every day. We'll let the machine do those things and release people to do more valuable things. So focus on creating superior value, get our operations and our information system. By the way, before computers, there was still an information system. Used to be written, sticky notes, people on roller skates running around. Get our culture together and aligned to the customer. And invest in the most important asset that we have. And certainly in the service industry, it's so obvious that people, the associates of your organization, are the asset, the most valuable business resource that you have. It's not even on your financial statement. Isn't that a shame when you think of it? If it was, it would be treated as an asset, and then people and organizations would invest in it hundreds of times greater than they do now. Microsoft understands that. Bill Gates, I think, understands that. I wonder if he's got a payoff. And leveraging technology across the enterprise. Don't get used by it. Don't be a slave to it. It's a tool to help you do your job. And we always perform well when we're under pressure. So if there isn't a sense of urgency, create one. Make it a real one, though, not a false one. Because this is when the very best comes out. Your mind knows how to segment and focus, and you'll take the kind of risk you need to take, and you'll generate those ideas that you would never think about unless there was an urgency. If you were to take process management as a strategy, and as I said, I've seen some companies who've made this their strategy, their business strategy, Hewlett-Packard being one of them, is they find those processes that are hidden and leverage them so that nobody can compete with them. Because it's not the product or the technology or the features that you can provide that will separate you from your competition or differentiate you. It's the processes that will separate you and differentiate you, how well those processes work. How many years has McDonald's hamburger enjoyed supremacy in the marketplace? On one simple thought, which was get the processes right So the skill of the people is not necessary to make them work every day, and use people to make customers happy so that customers have a good experience. Show the smile, the personal side of the whole thing. Don't have the processes dragging people into the back room cooking hamburgers and leaving the customers in the front of the store so that they wander around with no service. Organize around it and build the capability of your people. Now, we often don't use this slide, but I'm going to do it to you today because I want to get it on tape. If I drill into this leveraging processes for advantage, what I really mean, this is on page 5 in your workbook, you've got to rethink the whole way in which you do business. You do have a choice. Because what every company does is provide services to customers. You're all in the service business. We always were in the service business. Even a car manufacturer who thinks themselves as a product manufacturer, not in the service business, I learned differently. They are in the service business. They provide a means for people to get from point A to point B. And let's not look at anything else but growth, because the opportunities for growth today are like I've never seen before. And it's a lot easier to manage through a process than it is to manage by events. Wait for the event, bring the skill in. Wait for the engine to fail, bring the skill in. Get the scarf on the pilot and the goggles, and customers feel happy about that. But what could be more boring than sitting in an airplane every day, day in, day out, and having everything work perfectly? Got to start trying to figure out how to keep yourself excited. And that's what managing through processes can do. If you find the processes here in your organization and manage through them, life is quite easy. And then you turn around and organize around it. So much restructuring went on the last 10 years, and after all this restructuring, I look at the value of these corporations and they haven't changed an awful lot. So what happened to this restructuring? What good did it do? But if you reorganize around your core processes, you do that anyway. You're already organized that way informally. That's sort of what they call the dotted line on an org chart. That's the way you really operate. Well, that's the way you should organize formally. And find out what processes serve your customers. Get rid of those functional barriers, because they are barriers. Get people energized. Release that emotional energy that's in the organization. Put it to use in front of your customers. And you'll find that once you find the processes, the allocation of resources doesn't become a major effort. Resources are then pulled into the process as opposed to being pushed in. And management doesn't have to spend all their time figuring out how to allocate resources, because that's all that management really does in most cases anyways. Allocate resources, right? Or withhold them, depending on how they want to use them. And to make your information systems to enable adaptive learning. As I said, we are past the information age. We're now into the learning age. We really are. And if you recognize that now, you'll be way ahead of your competition. In terms of human capital, you've got to mobilize the power of the whole organization and get everybody working in different directions. You'll have an orchestra that makes a lot of noise. We're talking about talent, creativity, innovation, new ideas. Beg, borrow, steal, but get lots of ideas from anywhere and everywhere and try them out. Have the environment where you can do that. Hewlett-Packard, because of that, when they were in the medical electronics business, would probably never imagine back in those days that they would become one of the major printer manufacturers to the consumer market. Can you imagine that? How could that ever happen in a medical electronics manufacturing company? Why? Why would somebody ever think of doing that? Thank heavens they did. It's become one of the major contributors to their growth and to their profit. And talk about stealing ideas. The person in Hewlett-Packard who got that idea got it from Japan. Didn't steal it. They paid Japan a royalty for the engine to the printer and figured that they could package it at Hewlett-Packard and, using the power of Hewlett-Packard's brand, go after their customers and then learn more about that and then design their own. And ignite an obsession for customer service. You're all in the customer service business here. So am I. You're all salespeople. We're all in the sales department. being a salesman or a saleswoman is not a demeaning task. Oh, you're just a salesman. I think salespersons are the most important job there is. So what we're going to do is we're going to embark on a tactical plan right now. And the tactical plan is that we're going to map the processes that create value for customers. And then what we will do is do that process only once, because what most people do is they do the process 4 or 5 times before they get what they want. And sometimes 30 times it's done over again to get what you want. We want to get rid of all of the rework first and then start improving the process. And once we get to that stage, we can look at reducing the variation within process. And obviously you know that just getting to work at a certain time every morning, there's variation in that process, right? You have a choice of either being early or late. Your choice. And there is always variation that will cause it to be more late or more early. But you have the choice of which one you want. And then the next tactical plan is to reduce cycle time. Now that's a new word. I haven't mentioned that before. Rather than just reduce time, because that suggests that you're going to work faster and harder, cycle time allows you to take longer and work less harder, believe it or not. An example of that, of cycle time, would be, are there any baseball fans here in the room? There's a few. How long does it take to play a baseball game?
About 2 hours.
2.5, 3 hours, around in there. Now, I refer to that as span time or cycle time. Now, there's another time, whenever you say cycle time, you have to compare it to. So cycle time by itself means nothing. When it's compared to another time, which I refer to as process time or touch time, if you were to take a stopwatch and go to that 3-hour baseball game, and only when the ball is in play, you would start the watch and then stop it and start and stop it, and it would collect the time throughout the entire baseball game. What do you think the time on that stopwatch would be for ball in play throughout the...
15 or 20 minutes.
Is that really true, 15 or 20 minutes? Yeah, only 15 minutes out of 4 hours or 3 hours is actual baseball time. The rest of it's doing what everybody else does at a baseball game.
Golf's probably even better.
And that's why
Golf's
people-
4.5 hours, and process time is probably 3 or 4 seconds.
Exactly. I thought you were going to say 3 or 4 minutes. I was ready to say 3 or 4 seconds.
And that's why people don't...
Stealing my
like-
thunder.
There's a lot of people who don't like watching baseball or playing it. For
That's
that
right.
matter, because of that.
Whereas basketball, it's got a lot higher ratio of process time to cycle time.
But again, I think the error there is measuring only ball and play time, because that doesn't recognize all the other things that are going on the field, in the heads of the people involved.
Of course.
That make the game what it is.
Exactly, exactly. So be careful. The interesting thing, though, is when you say cycle time, what's the process time in order to compare it? What would be the ratio of cycle time to process time in processing a loan through loans? Is that something you do here in your business? What do you do with the money that you can't lend it to somebody? How long would what would the cycle time be for a loan?
Depends on the loan, a couple of days to a month.
A couple of days to a month. What would the process time be?
Not less.
Don't have to give me an answer for that. It could be seconds, it could be minutes, it might be 10 minutes, it might be 30 minutes at a stretch. The difference between the two is the opportunity. It's all waste. Some of it is waste, but most of it is usually waste. Challenge is, how much can I reduce that cycle time? That's after you get rid of the rework. Well, it's never-ending opportunity here. So to give you some structure, page 6 of your workbook, we're going to use this process. And you'll notice it starts with the customer and it ends with the customer. And there are some big steps. And you can drill into these steps, and there's lots of detail. I'm not going to talk about it now, but it has to do with getting issues, mapping a process, measuring the process, collecting data. Oh, here we go. Love-hate relationship. Discipline, detail, beneath your dignity. Some people love it, some people hate it. Get the people who love it to do it, the people who hate it, get them to do something else. Cause and effect. Experimentation. Hey, Tom, Mr. Fix-It. Cause and effect, experimentation, get result, put an improvement in, try it out, collect more data. Yes, it works. No, it doesn't. Satisfy the customer. Go back and do it again over and over until finally this is the way you do business. I guarantee that it'll work. It never fails. Processes have no brains. They only do what they're supposed to do. You don't believe me? When you work on your computer, you know what happens when you push the wrong key. It goes ding, stop, can't do that. And processes rely on processes, not on experts. People are released now to use their expertise elsewhere. Applies to all processes, powered by innovation, creativity, improved performance, realizing our true potential, delighting our customers. They'll crowd to our doors. And it's all having to do with results, because if you don't get results, then you feel like you're not really doing anything. And people need to see results. So, are you ready to run the simulator?